we've even had this conversation with our coaches a lot of like, you have two jobs. Your first job is to sit behind that computer and look at HQ and the trends of your athletes and analyze their data and understand if they're heading in the direction that you are trying to get them, if they're not, why, if they're not. Like, you are the data analyst in tracking their data. That's job number one. Job number two is when they come in the flesh and they're a human in front of you, interact, be a good coach, right? There's this art of coaching, connection, make them love being there. Like, make sure you're celebrating the little things that they're doing. Like, you know, there's this like real in-person type of thing. But the reality is you can't let one influence the other. That's the beauty of consulting, because, you know, on the college side, I don't work with any of the athletes in the flesh. So I just sit behind their data. And it certainly comes up where sometimes, like, I have to check coaches. They're like, oh, gosh, she's like, they want to pour into somebody because she's such a great kid. And we're approaching, you know, February 3rd. And I have to say, like, you got to let her go. You know, like, it's time to only give her 6% of your capacity, not because she's not a great kid. And I get it. And this is tough, but this is not, your job is to win, and you can't do that. And so I think it's so much easier to have that type of you know, lens when you only see data. And so we ask our coaches to do both, right? It's like, you don't take the human element out. I don't need to have the human element necessarily in consulting. They have a coach who's doing that. It's a totally different scenario. But our OGX coaches who are there on a regular basis, they do have to have both. And so what you're saying is, when you lean so much into one of just of like connecting with someone, they do things the way you want, they're so coachable, all of this, you could think they're your like shining star. But it is very possible that shining star, the kid who listens, does all the things, crosses all the T's, dots all the I's, her stuff is mediocre. There's just,
or it's not getting better, or it's not getting better from that. I think I think that's the thing, is like, okay, but let's just make sure that those things, the checking of the boxes, is actually making her get better. Because at the end of the day, when someone comes to OGX, our goal is to make them better. It's not just to make sure that they sort of like follow.
All right, what about
everything.
athletes, which we've all had, who are a little bit rogue, and their shit just gets better? Does anyone care?
Sounds great. Sounds great.
No, because it's like what I tell my kids in school, like, probably get in trouble at school every once in a while, because if you're never getting in trouble, that means you're always following in line. And I'm telling you, you're never going to do anything great in the world. You are just going to be average if you're always in line and you're always the kid that everyone's like, what a good kid. When it comes to being an athlete, if you want to be great, you gotta go rogue. You gotta color outside the lines.
Right. Well, it's like you gotta have drive, and sometimes that drive, it becomes a little bit of like, ooh. Yeah, I don't know if that was the way to do that. And I think obviously if it spills way too much, that's not great either. But it's this balance of those. I was thinking something when you were talking about the like smooth thing, Laura. Is like, I think there's no question that when you watch some of the top athletes, meaning this top literally 1%, you watch Nyjah throw and it's like, looks like she's barely exerting herself and she throws it at 75. There's an element that when you're that good, there's something like you are just able to just, you know, I made comments when we were at South Carolina, a couple of their kids, I'm like, ooh, they're just like smooth. I was holding the pocket radar. I'm like 67. It just looks like they're like barely trying, you know? And there's an element that is definitely true. And there is also an element where there are plenty of kids on the fringe who do very weird things that do not look efficient at all, but are able to have a lot of success because of that. And where we can get, those are the kids that are most likely to get just wrecked in this world, because then we're like, you need to look like Nyjah. That's what smooth and efficient looks like. Except that weird, inefficient pattern, that hitch you see, that arm path you see, is actually creating something very unique for that athlete. And if you take that away, that was that athlete's ticket to this level. And so then it becomes about really understanding that particular nuance. And so I think that's where we get into trouble a lot. It's like, of course, you know, to some degree, we want athletes to look smooth and effortless in what they're doing. And that's, but that's just not going to happen for everyone.